to look at is I want to look at the Shulchan Aruch, at Siman Taf Ayin Hey. Taf Ayin Hey. So Taf Ayin Hey is the title is Yeter Dinah HaSeder. Okay, and what it's really talking about is after you've had the second cup, which I mean we don't make a bracha on the second cup, and I think that Australia also don't make a bracha on the second cup, right? Am I right?
Second cup, no.
Yeah, only on the third and fourth. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Shulchan Aruch says in Taf Ayin Dalet. I'm happy to bring it up for you if you want to see it. You want to have a look at it so you can see the words. So the Shulchan Aruch says, look what it says. Yitzol Yadav, you wash your hands, you varech on the Tzilas Yadayim, and then you make a bracha on the Tzilas Yadayim. So you take the matzahs in the order in which they're lying there. The prusa between the two shleimas. Okay, so why is it so important to have the shleimus? Because you've got we need lechem mishnah. It's yontav. Yontav you have lechem mishnah as you do on Shabbos. Okay, now it's interesting. There's a machlokes, by the way, amongst the Rishonim. The Rambam, the Rif. Well, it's really the Rif comes first, then the Rambam. Hold that you only have two matzahs, so you have one whole and one half. Because remember, you use that half for the Afrikaner, but our minhag in the olam is to have three. Those who hold that you only have two, but our minhag is to have three, and we're going to see why. So you take the two shleimas, and you hold them in your hand, and you make hamotzi, and you make alachilas matzah. And then he says, you make hamotzi, you make alachilas matzah. Alachilas matzah is the mitzvah of the matzah, and then you take batzei shleima elyona from the top shleima, and from the middle one which is broken. Okay, and of course it says the Shulchan Aruch, and then you dip them in melach, you dip them in salt. But the Ramah says, "Ein aminag letovla b'melach b'layla rishona." He says, "Aminag is not to dip it in salt." Shimi, I don't know. What do you guys do? Do you dip it in salt? Do you remember?
I can't remember, Rov. I can double check. I can't remember.
No, that's not something that we like to remember. But the alminag of Ashkenaz is not to dip in salt on night one, right? Why the pas naki ain't tzarich melach, because the pas naki doesn't need melach. Now the question then is, do you need to have salt on the table? The reality is that you don't really need to ever dip in salt. Why do we dip in salt? We dip in salt in order to give it a flavor. The Shulchan Aruch, when it speaks about Shabbos, speaks about having salt on the table because our Shulchan is Doimen and Mizbeach. That's this week's parsha, actually, at the end of Perik Beis of Vayikra. It's the concept of the bris melach. The bris melach is this covenant of salt that we have, that in every single time we bring a korban, it has to have salt in our table. Our Doimen and Mizbeach. Our table is like a Mizbeach, and therefore it's appropriate to have salt on the table. And somehow it saves us from things because we're not speaking Torah once we've washed our hands. But you don't have to dip it in the salt. The minhag is different for many people. So, but comes along the Ramah and it says on the first night of Pesach you don't have to dip it. And then what do? You eat the leaning b'yachad kazais mikol echad. You've got to eat a kazais of the top one. That's the hamotzi, and you've got to eat a kazais of the middle one, which is for the alachilas matzah. Now, what's so interesting and what we need to bear in mind here is that on a Shabbos day, on a Friday night, which challah do you eat? You're going to take them in your hand, right? One on top of the other. Which challah do you eat? First. You might eat both. I mean, Perez now doesn't eat challahs at all, I'm sure now. He's so thin.
No, the top one, no? Top one.
No. So on a Friday night, remember, the way they would gather the man is they would gather the Friday and then they'd gather for the Shabbos. So the Friday night was the bottom one, okay? But that's only on a Friday night. But for Yom Tov, you should always do the top one. And that's why he says that That's why it says that you do it on the Shleima Alyona, on the night of Yom Tov. Okay. And if you can't eat two zaitim together, then at least you must eat hamotzi first, and then you eat the alachilas matzah. And then what do? Yikach maru. I think it's just important for us just to go through the process. Yikach zayis maru. You take a zayis of maru. V'yishka enu kul b'charoises. Now, what do you do with it? What do you do with maror? Because now you got to eat the maror. So what are you supposed to do with the maror? So it's very simple, right? You just v'yishka enu b'charoises. What does it mean? V'yishka enu b'charoises. That you put it in and you just like dip it into the charoises. That's what that from like shkia. You know, like the sun is shkia. Okay, so you dip it into the charoises. But now look what he says here. You don't leave it in the charoises. In order why? So because it's got to maintain its bitter taste. And because it's got to maintain its bitter taste, and you got to make sure that the charoises doesn't overpower the taste. What? What you actually have to do is you actually have to shake the charoises off. Okay, you with me? Shake the charoises off. Okay. And then you make the bracha of alachilas maror. So that what's the process? You take the maror, you dip it into the what's it called? The charoises, you shake it off, and then you make the bracha. Right? You can see how the Mishnah Berurah says, why do you put it into it? So the Gemara says, in order to kill, I don't know, the eres is like there's a poison in the charoises. I don't know what that is. It says, some just dip it in a little bit. So because there's no real eris, we don't have any like poison within the maror. I don't know what the poison was, but we don't have that poison anymore. So since we don't have that, so you just dip it a little bit, and so you've got a little bit, but you mustn't lose the flavor of the maror. And you eat it without haseba. And after that, noitel matzah shlishis. Then you take the third matzah. What do? Now this is interesting. You koicha im maror. You. What's lichroch mean? Lichroch means to fold. You fold it with the maror, the tov la b'charoises, and then you dip it into the charoises, right? And he says, the Rama v'yesh omrim de'en l'tov lo. He says, the thing is, maybe by the Sfardim, the minag is to dip it into the charoises. Shimi, I don't know if you remember this. But by us, we do charoises. Now that's fascinating. In other words, you have matzah and maror without charoises in the sandwich. That's what he wants to say. Okay? Without the charoises. Okay?
So we do put a little bit.
Yeah, so look here. So look what he says here in the Mishnah Berurah here says the side. On the side here, it says here, the Toivlo Becharoises, Sharei Kricha Zui Zeichel HaMikdash, Kehilel. Because remember, that Kricha, this sandwich that we call it, is Zeichel HaMikdash Kehilel. Vehilel Yamakam Mitzvahs Charoises B'Maro. Hillel held there was a mitzvah of Charoises with the Maro. Zeh Shebekricha Sharei Lo Haya Oichel Maro Klal Kodim Kricha. Because for Hillel himself never ate the maror before the sandwich. He only ate the sandwich. But if you're going to have the charoises together with the kricha, with the sandwich, you've also got to shake off the charoises itself. Why is the minhag not to dip it in charoises? You already fulfilled the mitzvah of charoises with the first dipping. So you don't have to worry about the poison either because you're eating it with the matzah. So the whole point of it's a fascinating concept. I must be honest, I don't really understand what this poison is that they keep speaking about. And I haven't really seen anybody who really goes into the depth of what the poison is. Okay? But it seems to be that we're worried about a certain danger because of the intensity, maybe that's what the poison is, the intensity of the maror. Since we worry about the danger of the intensity of the maror, remember we lived for a year where danger is the operative word, and we have to be careful. So since we have to be careful about the danger, we dip it in the charoses to remove that the extent of that danger. But if you're eating it together with the matzah, you don't have to worry about the danger. Therefore, there's no reason to dip it in the charoses. Okay, just as a framework for us to understand. And then we say the Zeikel Mikdash Kehillel for Oichlam beyachad b'haseiba. And this time, when we eat the maror together with the matzah, we do eat with haseiba, leaning umishebirech al achilas matzah. Now listen to this, guys. When you make the brocha of al achilas matzah, the mitzvah brocha, lo yasiach b'davar she'enu me'inyan ha'su'uda ad she'yachal kri chazu. You should not speak about anything until you've eaten the sandwich. Until you've eaten the sandwich. Because the whole process of the brocha of achilas matzah and the brocha of achilas maror continue with this sandwich. Understand? So we have to make sure that the brocha vests both on the sandwich and on the both on the sandwich and on the eating separately of the two things. Okay, so that's number one. Then I want to just carry on now. Okay, he says here, im ein lo yerakot l'tibul rishon ela maror. So it's, by the way, we know that there is a mitzvah of what we call tibul rishon. What's tibul rishon? Tibul rishon is the first thing that we dip. Where is that? We call that karpas. So what happens if you don't have other yerakos, other like celery or whatever? Remember, with Baruch Hashem, we got whatever we need. What happens if you don't have that? Then ela maror, the only vegetable you've got is maror. Yavarech elav betibul rishon borei pri adama al achilas achilas maror bitul hasheni betibul hasheni yitbelen b'charos v'yochlenu beloy bracha. You see this? He says that if you can only eat the maror, then you would eat the maror right at the beginning of the Seder, okay? And but you don't have to worry about that because that's not going to happen. Now, this is a big one, and this is a very important one, because this now begins to describe, I mean, it's amazing. The halacha defines how we're supposed to eat. Bala matzah, if all you do is swallow the matzah, I don't know how you can just swallow the matzah whole, but without tasting it. Avalim bala maror lo yatsa. But if you only eat the maror without tasting it, you don't fulfill the obligation. Why? The tam maror ba'inan. You need the taste of the maror. V'leika. And when you just swallow it, you don't get it. Ba'filim bala matzah umaror ke'echad. And even if you swallow them together, you fulfill the mitzvah of matzah, but you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah of maror. So that's just important for us to understand. You actually have to chew the maror. You've got to get the taste of that maror. So the question is, what is the maror that you're supposed to eat? I don't know what you guys eat. What do you guys have for maror?
Romaine lettuce.
Romaine lettuce. Okay. Shai, Dan, what do you guys have? Looks like they've disappeared. Shai and Dan. Shai, you there?
Checked romaine lettuce.
Checked romaine lettuce. Okay. So how does romaine lettuce reflect the bitterness of Mitzrayim? Nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's not the greatest, but it's not terrible. I'm not saying you're wrong.
I don't know. They say the whole chap is that it's like kind of starts off sweet and then near the end it's
exactly. So that's why you have to taste it, because you got to taste the sweetness, you got to taste and have the feel of the bitterness that then comes afterwards. Okay. I want to show you this. This is like a fascinating thing. Shimi, why do you have 3 matzahs on the table?
I'm back. I went to the bathroom. I'm back.
Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Okay.
I can't remember. I just remember a quote from Rav Shimshon Pinkas was that it represents Chochmah, Bina, and Dat. I don't know how.
Okay.
I mean, it's one pshat. I don't know.
Beautiful idea. Geschmack idea, actually. Okay. And besides Rav Shimshon Pinkas, why do we have it?
But the three matzahs.
Yeah, 3 matzahs.
Zeicher lelechem Torah, like it says there.
Oh, very nice, Shimi. So now look at this. It's an amazing idea. So when you ask anybody, why do you have 3 matzahs? What do they say? They say it comes to correspond to the what's it called, to the Kohen Levi Yisrael. You know, there's that whole story, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's not brought anywhere. Well, not here. That's brought on the basics, but on the level of the Shulchan Aruch says ein chiyuv achilas matzah ele b'layla rishon bilvad. The chiyuv, right? The actual chiyuv is only on the layla rishon. You'll see what that means, yeah. Okay, and that's talking about in Eretz Yisrael, right? The actual chiyuv of eating the matzah is only on the first night. Now it says the Haggadah. I'll come back to this. I want to look at this thing here. Okay, but it says the Ramah. V'nahagul asois shlosh matzos al seder me'isaron. What does that mean? What does it even mean? What's he talking about? I don't know. We lost this page. Let's see. V'nahagul achol matzos al seder. What shall seder me'isaron? What's isaron? Me'isaron.
Likely. From the word Osher maybe.
It could be. But where do you know that word from? You know where you know it from? You know it from every time it speaks about korbanot. Isaron, solet mincha b'la b'Hashem. Isaron, right? You know that word? Whenever you speak about what Isaron is a measurement. It's a measurement.
Yeah.
A measurement of flour that is brought in the Beis Hamikdash. How big is the measurement of flour? The measurement of flour that is enough to bake 3 matzahs.
Yes. Yes.
And it's brought, and that's what's of made said Isaron, Zecher Lachmei Toida. You bring it as a remembrance of the Lachmei Toida. Okay? Now, this is interesting. Why is it interesting? Because the reality is that do you bring a Korban Toida on Erev Pesach? Do you bring a Korban Toida on Pesach at all? No, you can't. Why can't you? Because you can't have the chometz that comes with it. It's chometz stick. Okay? That's why you understand that. So what's the Korban Toida got to do with Pesach? It's a bit crazy. You got that? And then he says, the minhag is also v'oisim b'hem siman. The minhag is to make a little siman. Leida ezer rishona, which one was baked first, or shnia, or second, or third. U'meinichim harishona el yoina v'ashnia be'emtza v'ashlishis b'tachtoina lekricha. Right? Imshina lo ikev. And if you change the order, it doesn't make a difference. Okay? But oifin also gam ken geseder, and you also cook it in that, you bake it in that order. This was your question. If one of them breaks, so then you take it for another one. You understand? So we don't have to worry about that. So it would seem to be like, it's quite an interesting idea, that if you are baking your own matzah, the way to bake your own matzah is to set aside an isaron of flour, knead it, get it ready, and then bake these 3 matzahs. I mean, I think it would be the most unbelievably meaningful thing to do, is to really to bake your own matzahs and do like this. The first one, the second one, the third one, you bring it to the Pesach Seder, you've got the Korban Toida in front of you, it's like Geshmak. But why do you have to have a Korban Toida? Where's the Korban Toida coming from? So the Vilna Gaon says, the person who comes out of a jail, like we were as Am Yisrael, we were in jail. You have to say thank you to Hashem. And what's the way we say thank you to Hashem? Via the Korban Toida. Right? That's what the bracha of some say of Asher Ga'alanu, that Hashem redeemed us is like our own. You know, when you bench Goimel, you bench Goimel, but when you come out of certain places. So that's the same case where you would be benching the Goimel on this. And so we see, it's fascinating. Right? But now, so look here, if you see here in the the Mishnah Berurah says, what simon are you supposed to make on this matzah that you made? It says, "Va'ein la'asot oitios le'kera." You can't make any sign, any letters. Why? Because when you break it, you like moichek. It's an issue deraisa of moichek. Okay, so the important part of this is this 3 matzahs are not coming Kohen Levi Yisrael. That's not brought down in halacha. The 3 matzahs are coming to represent the korban toida that we should be bringing as a representative of the sense of, what's the word I'm looking for, of gratitude that we feel towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu for what He did to us on that night, and that is really. And he says there, what is the va'af balayla rishon yotze b'kazayis? What does it mean? Yotze b'kazayis, that you fulfill your obligation with the kazayis. And if you look at the Mishnah Berurah says, let's go down. He's talking about the eating of that matzah. Okay, so that's the first part of Shulchan Oreich. Shulchan Oreich is this eating that starts off with the washing of hands, with the taking of the matzahs in that special way, remembering how we do it, putting those things down, putting those one things down, not dipping in salt or dipping in salt, depending on your minhag, and then making sure that we lean. Then says the Shulchan Aruch. Just by the way, there's a minhag for some to eat roasted food on Pesach. I don't know what the Sfarim do. I don't know what you do, Shimi, if you eat or you don't eat.
What's it, roasted?
Like roasted, meat. Like a braai. Could you have a braai on Pesach?
I don't know. I can't remember. I remember we don't do it.
So we don't do it as well. So that says the Shulchan Aruch, Makom shenagu le'echol tzli b'leile psachim oichlim, Makom shenagu shele'echol ein oichlim. It says it depends on your minhag. But those who don't eat, why don't we have it? Gezeira. It's a gezeira. Shema yomru pesachu b'chol makom asu le'echol setz li kuloi. We're worried that people will think that you like eating a korban pesach.
Korban. Yeah, that's
okay, so that's our worry. And then he says, look at this here. He says, at the meal. This is a din in the meal. Don't eat too much. He says, why? Because you don't want to eat the afikomen on what he calls achila gasa. What is achila gasa? Achila gasa is, it says, achila gasa means you've eaten too much. It's excess. That's the word I'm looking for. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you don't have any desire whatsoever to eat. Then you don't do the mitzvah min ha-mufchar. You don't do the mitzvah of afikomen is a mitzvah. It's not stam eating. Afikomen is a mitzvah. Even though the afikomen is a zeicher, only a remembrance of the korban Pesach. Pesach was eaten. You didn't eat the korban Pesach as your meal. You ate the korban Pesach on the meal that you'd eaten. The hainushu sava kfar, that is already satisfied. So that's why you eat the afikomen at the end of the Suda, right? You need to have a desire, a physical desire to eat the afikomen. If you don't have that desire, then it's not, you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah to its best point. And if you are so full, listen to this. That you are so full that you there's just room for you to have to eat more.
Sure.
Unbelievable. If you're so full that you're really forcing that afikomen down, you do not fulfill your mitzvah whatsoever. Why? Now listen to this. She'achila gasa kazu, says the Mishnah Berurah, that eating in such an excessive way like this, eino nikres achila klal. It's not considered to be achila at all. Okay? So he says, yeah, Kasva Poiskim, the Poiskin right. Al Yachir Asafikoimen Alav Latoirach. Don't make Afikoimen be a difficult thing for you to do. Because if it's difficult for you to do, you got to do the mitzvah in a mufchar. How do you do the mitzvah in its best way? Not when it's a Torah, but when you're happy to do it. You've got space left inside. You know what? I'm going to fill that space with a shtickle matzah, which is my mitzvah. And he says, yeah, you've got to be careful. Number one, on achilas gasa, and number two, or yishtaker v'yoshen miyad, you fall asleep. V'yoshen miyad v'tanya b'toisef t'chayev adam la'asok b'ilchus pesach kol halayah. What are you supposed to do? La'asok b'ilchus pesach. You're supposed to talk about Pesach the whole night. But you're such a donkey. You're unable to speak about Pesach the whole night because you're drunk and you fall asleep. But then throws the Shulchan Aruch and says something really interesting. He says, yeah, you know what? By the way, afilu basar egel v'oif kol davar shetan shchita asu le'echol tzli b'makom shenagu shelo le'echol tzli. So by the way, anything that requires shchita can't be bride. So I said in Shiur the other day, what does this mean? It means that if you want to have a fish braai on Pesach, if you're into that, I dig it, but I'm not going to do it. You can have one on Pesach for your meal. You can have a fish braai. You can't have a normal braai, but you can have a fish braai. Okay? Okay? And then he says, Rov,
in the day, there's no problem. It's just at night.
The day you can do whatever you want. There's the only issue is the night of Pesach. Then he says, I will finish on this. Right? We eat at the Suda, beitzim, eggs. Zecher la'avelus. Why do we have to be avelus?
Isn't it zecher la'korban chagiga?
Look what he says here. All right. Why? Well, we're going to get there. Let's go. Venerally, why avelus? He says the Shulchan. The Ramah quotes it and he says, I think the reason is because of this. It's quite interesting, right? Venerally, atam mishum she'leilei Tisha B'av nikva b'leil Pesach. Because there's a siman involved. We know that whatever the first night of Pesach is, will be what? The night of Tisha B'av. It's the same night, always.
Yeah.
Not only that, we also remember the Churban. We right? Shayu makrivin korban Pesach. Because they would bring a korban Pesach. We can't even have a korban Pesach, so we eat the egg as a zeicher to the korban Pesach. Okay? Sorry, it's not a zeicher to the korban. It's a zeicher l'churban. The zeicher to the korban Pesach is that roasted shank bone that we don't eat. Okay? The yesh nagim sheler lo echol shum tibul b'layla rak beis tifulim she'oisim b'seder. And there are those who are very careful only to eat two things that are dipped. And what is the two things that are dipped? And why is it so important? He says, by the way, so we learned that you dip what? You dip the karpas in the salt water, and then you dip the maror into the charoises, right? Okay, but if you dipping your sandwich into the charoises is not a third dipping. So what is he actually talking about here? How do you eat your eggs at your Seder?
Dip it in salt water.
We have like this thing that we dip our eggs in salt water. So the question really is where on earth does that come from? Right? Like why do we have an egg that we dip in salt water? That's my question. Not that we have the egg, but why do we dip it in salt water? Okay? I'm just trying to see if he brought in this one. I saw it, but I can't remember the reason. Yeah. So he quotes from the Gra. The Gra says, Od tamit nesha beitza hu zeichel chagiga. The beitza is coming to represent the chagiga. Okay? Lefiza nira di yahader leechol gambalel alef oisa beitza she'alakara, says the Vilna Gaon. We don't eat the zrah because that's roasted, as we said, right? And we don't eat any roasted, and we eat the afikomen of the matzah. But there is a hidur to eat the egg on the first night. That egg that is representing is on the ka'ara, right? And then he says, Usha'ar beitzim. So how come we have all those other beitzim, right? For everybody. Look at this. Says the Vilna Gaon. Usha'ar beitzim she'oichlin humishum shenis rabev haminhag. What does that mean?
Got mixed up.
Right? People just took this egg, and I was doing it, and so then you did it as well. And it just became, I think he's dying. And it just became this minhag to eat an egg. So what we've done is we've gone through a number of important halachas that apply to Pesach, apply to the Seder, and please God, next week we'll have one more shiur next Tuesday night before Pesach. That we'll go through a few more just to finish off the Seder. We're so busy with the first part of the Seder always, we don't always look deeply into the second part, at least not even in a halachic way, to understand exactly how we're supposed to do things, proper things, the way we're supposed to say the Hallel, the way we're supposed to bench, all of those things. We'll look into Bezrat Hashem next week, guys. Have a wonderful week, guys. Shkach, guys.
Ciao, ciao.
Good week, man. Dan, have a good week.
Thanks, Lego.
Cheers, guys.